Curt Kennedy. Your Jesus is cool with stuff mine ain't cool with. Like white being on top, how is that not cool with? Your Jesus acts like the pain people facing is Marxism or it's just simply imagination. Your Jesus acts like he ain't even a friend of the people that you say got an evil leftist agenda. Your Jesus acts like babies in the placenta are more important than ones in the world that he said could enter. Your Jesus loves your conferences and antics when you calling out your brothers for stuff that's really semantics. Your Jesus is down for cannibalism. Grace to you, what you don't see, dude, got Hannibal in him. Face it, Duke, you love Zion, you was pandering with him and threw brothers under the bus like mechanical systems. Your Jesus says be proud, cause you will reform, and attacking those who will not, cause they worthy of scorn. It's like that. The problem with your Jesus is your Jesus. The problem with your Jesus is your Jesus. Your Jesus teaches that love is love and it comes from him. He's cool with sexual sin, everything, he don't punish it. Your Jesus teaches that faith is the same as faith, and Numbers 21 is saying we should put up with snakes. Your Jesus teaches salvation is a formality. You good as long as you claim spirituality. Your Jesus teaches that love is your nationality. It's the same as loving him, but that is a grim reality. Your Jesus is cool with racist theologians men of the time, but not black Christians who say expose them. Your Jesus is cool with whites who uphold him, not the Africans who taught the theology they're beholding. Your Jesus wants blacks to sinfully scold them and try to make us all true sides like menus we holding. Your Jesus is a goofball, proof y'all ain't saints, truth y'all win only when you spin foosball. The problem with your Jesus is your Jesus. The problem with your Jesus is your Jesus. Your Jesus is cool with you and all your blackness, demanding that protection should cover you prophylactics. Your Jesus is cool with since you've been sinned against, it's your turn, pandemic against privileges that you didn't get. Your Jesus is cool with black kids get felonies, but white collar crimes get slap on the wrist penalties. Your Jesus thinks theology is the remedy, more than loving your neighbor, you'd rather they be your enemy. Your Jesus is cool with giving people clemency, but they don't have to bow like he did when in Gethsemane. Your Jesus is cool with the culture and compromise morality so they do not insult you. Your Jesus is cool, abortion's not an issue, but my Jesus gave that baby his skin tissue. Your Jesus ain't Jesus at all, fam. It's all scam, it's all made up like it's all glam. That's y'all, man. All
right.
The problem with your Jesus is your
What's good, everybody? Welcome to the basement again, where theology meets the thoughts of life. It's good to be with y'all here again, here on this episode. So make sure you share and like the video. Facebook.com/Wrath and Grace. This is our website, and make sure you go to the website and support. We have merch, publishing, music, ministries, radio networks, and we can even custom print t-shirts and things like that. So you can go on the website, wrathandgrace.com. So make sure you go there and support the ministry, man. Support what God is doing there. We would appreciate that. And comment on the comment section. We are highly interactive with you. We try to respond to your questions and your comments, or even disagreements you might have. We love to just chop on the comment section. So put down your questions for our guest or for us on this program right now. We also came out with the new album, Contra Mundum. You know what I'm saying? That's how you say it in Spanish. You know what I mean? So you can go on to the link. I'm going to put the link on our comment section and make sure you support. It's a dope album. Go out and get it. Make sure you support Wrath and Grace here in this ministry. So what's up, Wayne? What's going on?
Yo, what's going on? Yo, I just got a text that the background music.
What's up?
It's distracting, the words.
Oh,
my bad.
I'm gonna fade it, y'all. Don't worry about it.
No, I just got it just now. That's why I was just reading it. My bad. So we're back in here, y'all. We're back in the basement. We got a special guest, Curt Kennedy, with us tonight, and man, do we have an episode to go through. Oh my goodness. I had a couple people hit me up and say, yo, be careful. Watch what y'all say tonight. I'm like, man, I know the Lord is going to hold us accountable for every word that we say. But anyway, man, before we get into I guess we could get into a reintroduction of who Curt is, but let me just talk a little bit about what we're going to talk about tonight. I asked a question earlier this week in the basement. I said, what is racism, Reformed evangelical Christians, Voddie Baucham, social justice, Candace Owens, and politics all have in common? And everyone said, yo, I don't know where you're going with this one. And I just said simply, this is what we're going to be talking about in the next episode in the basement. So yeah, tonight we're going to talk about racial tensions in the Reformed churches, Voddie Baucham, and like some of his thoughts on social justice, and then our thoughts on social justice a little bit, and then Candace Owens and political views. There's going to be a lot to talk about tonight. So without further ado, let's start episode 63, Finding Balance. We're going to try to find some balance tonight, y'all. Curt, what's going on, bro? How you doing?
Good, man. What's up with you? Good to be back with y'all brothers.
Yeah, man. I'm glad you joined us tonight. I hope it's not too late for you.
Nah, I'm good, man. I'm just, ate good with the family. I grilled today, so.
Okay. That's what's up.
I had that grill,
That's
I'm back in here, man. Last time I was on here, man, I had on the gray t-shirt. So I felt like, man, I need to come back in the gray.
With the gray. Not black, not white, you in the gray.
You know what I'm saying? That's it. I like the gray smoke. It's the gray smoke. I take all that smoke from the black and white side. I don't matter.
Nah, that's what's up. So, all right, let's get into this. I think that before we get into the topic, I think there's some historical context that we got to give here, right? Because I read an article that you had posted, and I hit you up and say, yo, Curt, can you jump on the podcast with us? We got to talk about some things. Are you able to break down some of the things you're talking about and, some of these other thoughts that I might, want to talk about? And you said for sure. So I'll let you take that away right there.
Yeah, man. So I need a few minutes to kind of lay out the historical context to a lot of this. Some of it was what you read, Wayne, when you saw that post, that thread that I did, and some of it is not on that. But before I say anything, let me say this. But because I believe that all sin and have fallen short of the glory of God, I'm not on anybody's team. So I'm not in the conservative right. I'm not in the liberal left. I'm a centrist. And I don't mean centrist Democrat, centrist Republican. I'm in between them both. Like, I don't subscribe to a political party or anything. I'm a pastor. I'm a husband. I'm a dad. I rap. I'm trying to honor the Lord and persevere to the end. So, and the reason why I'm saying this is because we've gotten to a point in our culture. When I say culture, I mean the church. I'm not talking about the world at this point. The world is going to be the world, but I think in the church, we're so triggered by all of these types of conversations that no matter what you say, it's like if you critique anything, like I tweeted this the other day, if you critique someone on the conservative right, you're a leftist, Marxist liberal. If you critique someone on the liberal left and you support white supremacy and this, but the cross critiques everyone. And because I stand with the cross, I'm not afraid to do that. So I'm not in any way trying to throw anyone under the bus. I just want to give some historical context to this conversation to help shape why things are the way they are. I'm fine if people don't agree with everything I say. This is I disagree with you decade anyway. So I'm cool with that. Having said that, man, to really understand what's happening right now and to really see how far this thing has gotten political. Like, this is, since George Floyd's death, this has really become a political issue. And it almost was like, depending on how you respond to George Floyd would determine for people where you are politically. So if you felt like, man, that was wrong what happened to him, and then you were believing the left narrative and you weren't waiting for the facts, and you're a leftist liberal. And if you're more concerned about the riots that happened afterwards and not as much about George Floyd, then you're a white supremacist and you don't care about, and it just became like, wow, depending on how I respond to this will determine whether I have a political inkling or not. It became that. And so what I want to do is back up and talk a little bit about why we're in this place. And so I'm going to ask for a few minutes to do that, because this context will be important, I think, for everything else we say. I'll try to say it as quickly as I can, because I don't want to, it's a long story, but I think it's a story worth telling.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to say this, and I'm not going to get into this too much, but I'll say this. One thing we have to understand is, whether we like it or not, even though our country has done some amazing things, even in its most vilest moments, that being the case, the country founded on Christianity has left a significant stain in the world, because America, as far as I know, is probably the only nation that started itself based on Judeo-Christian values. And it's the only nation that actually used the Bible as a weapon. The gospel that frees people from the slavery of sin was used to enslave people for sinful purposes. And we can't shy away from that. A lot of people say that was a long time ago. Interesting, in the scriptures, God doesn't think like that happened a long time ago. God thinks like that happened. You know what I'm saying? When he told the Jews, when he said, look, the queen of the south is going to rise up and judge this nation, or the Ninevites are going to judge this nation, because they repented when Jonah said, but God doesn't think like, oh, that happened 300 years ago. He thinks that happened, and there's going to be judgment based upon that. And I think because that has been the case about America, what America did was it failed to show that change and repentance and faith and change are founded in Jesus Christ. Because it allowed for slavery and racism, it took away the saltiness of the gospel for people who believe it. Not totally sure the gospel was preached, but the way that it was demonstrated, not just proclaimed, but practiced, it caused a lot of people to turn to a negative view. Like, no one had hope in Christianity the way they should have. I'm not saying there wasn't great awakenings and these things, sure, but it was all based on a lot of hypocrisy. And because of that, the church no longer had a lot of moral founding. So everyone, including the church, began to look to the political side of things for real change and real hope. So then you get the American Revolution, and the three Trinitarian documents come out of that, which is the Father is the Declaration of Independence, and the Son, the Constitution, and the Holy Spirit, the Bill of Rights. And these three documents govern society, including Christians, in a way where Christians slowly become more dependent on these things for change and for hope, for politicians, for unregenerate people to tell regenerate people how they're supposed to live and how to govern themselves. Now remember, that wouldn't be a problem, but this is a country based on Judeo-Christian values. This is a country that used the Bible to incite men to go to war. I have a book behind me on my shelf called Sacred Scripture, Sacred War, that highlights sermons that were used during the American Revolution to inspire men to give their lives, if necessary, to fight against the tyranny of England. But the church didn't do that against its own tyranny towards African slaves. And so you have this sort of hypocrisy running through. And then something happens towards the late 19th century. Darwin releases two books. One in 1859, he releases The Origin of Species. And then in 1871, he releases The Descent of Man. And this was one of the first times that Christianity was actually challenged as not the predominant worldview, particularly as it relates to creation. And so you had the evolution versus creation debates in the early 20th century. So as this book starts to take shape and all this stuff starts to happen, there was in Dayton, Tennessee, one of the most famous cases in the history of our country happened, where there was a guy who was he was a former congressman and an ex-secretary of state named William Jennings Bryan. He was the leader of the anti-evolution movement, and he would deliver speeches like The Menace of Darwinism and The Bible and Its Enemies. And he was a fundamentalist Christian that really was one of the main ones who sort of brought in this combative view of culture, this combative view of society. This fundamentalism is what we're against. Anything that, probably taking 2 Corinthians 10, we demolish every stronghold and every thought that raises itself against the knowledge of God. Well, he starts delivering this pushback against evolution. And all of a sudden, in 1925, the Tennessee House of Representatives approved a bill by a congressman, I think it's John William Butler. It's called the Butler Bill, that would allow no one to teach evolution in the state of Tennessee. You were only allowed to teach creation. It was, the world, ironically, was a Christian nation, even though that was in the midst of Jim Crow. So what happens is there's a guy who's a substitute teacher is asked to teach creation, evolution in a classroom, and it goes to this trial, and it becomes, his name is Scopes, John Scopes, and there's this famous trial called the Scopes Monkey Trials, where basically it's the evolution versus creation debate. Now, the judge of that trial, he was a staunch believer. So there was no way that the evolution was going to win, but this trial was covered across the whole country. This was back in the radio days, but they had reporters. It was on radio. It was on newspapers. Everyone was talking about creation versus evolution. And even though creation won in the court, it lost in the court of public opinion. Mm. So once people started to really hear what Christians believe, and it was this big deal where the main defense attorney, Darrow, puts Brian on the stand. And this was a big deal. These were like the two best. Remember that movie, A Few Good Men, when you got Tom Cruise and Jack Nicholson in the courtroom going, and it's like this major moment. It kind of had that impact in culture. And I mean, this is a famous case. Everyone knows. You can Google this and find out about the Scopes Monkey Trials. But the court of public opinion started to mock Christianity. And from that, a lot of fundamentalists kind of developed this Christian separatist, where it became theologically conservative, but culturally combative. It was like, you know what? We're backing away from culture. These people are kind of going to hell in a handbasket, if you will. And there was much of a removal of fundamentalists. But this was at the time where everyone was called kind of evangelicals, and fundamentalists were sort of interchangeable, right? Then all of a sudden, Billy Graham shows up on the scene. You got three guys that show up on the scene, and they start to change things. So you got the fundamentalists, who are clearly separatists. They do not want to be engaging in culture. And then you got a guy named Carl Henry. Carl F. H. Henry. You got Billy Graham, and then you got Harold Ockenga. These three men, they change everything. And all of a sudden, they kind of are dubbed neo-evangelicals, because they have a theologically conservative / culturally compassionate perspective. They felt like, no, we don't move away from the culture. We engage the culture. So these men did stuff like in World War II, they started this thing called Carl Henry and Harold Ockenga did what was called War Vision, which was giving different countries aid that were participating in the war, and that later became World Vision. What we know as World Vision today started off as War Vision, giving aid to different countries in the world who were fighting in the war, in World War II. And then they also started Christianity Today, trying to create an evangelical presence that was engaging in the culture. Now, during this time, Billy Graham started to really blow up. And Billy Graham was actually friendly with Dwight D. Eisenhower. And in the 1950s, Billy Graham decided that he was no longer going to have segregated preaching. So it was in the South. I want to say it was Georgia, but I could be wrong. But there was he was doing a crusade, and he made them take down the rope that separated the white and black people. So you had these fundamentalists that were separatists, that were also racist. They were angry that Billy Graham is now crossing the streams, if you will. And so Harold Ockenga, Carl Henry, and Billy Graham, they're trying to engage culture. They feel like we need to engage with culture and speak to these things. And in fact, Carl Henry, who's a hero to many of the fundamentalists today, wrote what I would consider a somewhat scathing critique in 1947 called The Uneasy Conscience of Modern Fundamentalism. And I want to read an excerpt of this later because I want to continue the story. So this happens, and as things start to develop, the fundamentalists move further and further away from engaging with culture. They don't want to participate at all. So when the 60s come, you get the pill, And then from the pill, now people can take a pill and not get pregnant. So then you get the sexual revolution. Everyone's having sex. You get the gay rights movement. You got civil rights unrest. You got the Vietnam War. You got the increase in drug usage. And so the fundamentalist Christians, now they're really backing away. And they're also angry at Billy Graham and these other guys because they're engaging in culture. They start critiquing that Billy Graham is now saying stuff that's not even sound doctrine, it's not biblical. And he said something that was questionable in one crusade that he never really clarified what he meant. But for the most part, Billy Graham was one of the most important evangelical figures of the day. But what happened was there was a split between fundamentalists who were theologically conservative but culturally combative, and there was a split between evangelicals who were theologically conservative but culturally compassionate. So one side is moving away from culture, and another side is moving towards it. And around this time, this is when the dispensation theology of the rapture really blew up, because there was this sense where people were waiting for the Jesus to come back. The fundamentalists are waiting for Jesus to come back and take them away from this burning world, these people who are destined to go to hell. There was a combative, adversarial attitude, and this is all documented. I can give you receipts if need be, because people sometimes talk out the side of their neck. This ain't no story I'm making up. So this happens, and then you get the 70s roll around and you get abortion. All right, abortion happens actually under Richard Nixon, okay, a Republican. He's the one who actually institutes that. It gets a 7-2 vote, right? So you got one Democrat, one Republican opposed it. So 3 Republicans were with it, 4 Democrats were with it. It gets this vote. 1974 and 1976, the SBC was okay with it. No one had an issue with abortion, particularly under the guidelines of rape, incest, or the mom may experience some kind of health problems. It wasn't an issue. But here's what was also happening. At the same time, Bob Jones and Liberty University and other private Christian universities were not allowing black people at their schools. And the IRS started sending letters as early as 1971 to these schools to ask them, are you integrating? Do you have integrate? And they were like, no. Bob Jones was like, no, we do not allow African Americans here. They were against it. Jerry Falwell was not having it. So what happened was in 76, the IRS took away the tax exemption status from Bob Jones. And that's when Jerry Falwell and some of these big, fundamentalists, they realized, hey, if we don't do something, then the government can just step in and take away from us what we need. The issue for them was they were offended that racial integration was imposed upon them. Now think about this. Bob Jones didn't fully integrate until 2000s. So that he kept going for a while. Interracial dating was illegal at Bob Jones until not too long ago. I'm talking about 21st century, right? It wasn't that long ago that interracial dating, as a matter of fact, the first people that Bob Jones let in, he would only let people in who were married because he did not want black men marrying white women. And Bob Jones wasn't afraid to say this. Jerry Falwell at Liberty had a similar situation. So now, once this happens, they got to rally together and push back. And so they get together with Francis Schaeffer, and Francis Schaeffer starts talking about abortion and other issues that Christians should be concerned about. And Jerry Falwell and them, they know that they cannot rally people around racial integration. They can't rally people. They got some of the leaders to back that up. But in order to get evangelicals together, they had to come with some issues that would be things that people would care about. And that's when in 1978, 5 years after abortion had passed, Jerry Falwell gives his first public disagreement with it. And he had been rallying leaders and getting Francis Schaeffer to help him rally white evangelicals who had significant influence in the culture, rallying together around this issue of abortion. But to be honest, the real issue was not abortion. It was racial integration. They did not like the fact that black people were now allowed by the government, forced to come onto their campuses. And they felt like, listen, we don't take money from you all, so we shouldn't have to submit to the rules. We're privately funded, but they were still tax exemption status by the government. So it was either you lose that or you integrate. So they fight back by creating what we now call as the religious right. They rally around the issue of abortion. And that's where Jimmy Carter in 1980 gets ousted by Ronald Reagan. When Jimmy Carter became president, Time magazine put on the front cover the year of the evangelicals. He was a Christian, but because he was a Democrat, even though the Republicans were the ones that signed off on abortion, because he was a Democrat, they didn't want him in there. By that time, the Republicans in the culture, just politically, had removed themselves from the black cause. The Republicans, because Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, and the Fair Housing Act, because Democrats did that, they lost the black vote. Black people were like, hey, listen, they changed the laws, we going with them. Black people weren't tripping off with the fact that they held us as slaves. It was like, they changing the laws, we going with these folks. So Republicans had already removed themselves from being included in any of the black causes. In fact, Richard Nixon started the Southern strategy. The South was mostly Democrat, fam. They were white racist Democrats. He did his whole Southern strategy move, and then all of a sudden those people become Republicans. So now a lot of the racist people in the South even are now Republicans, and the black people and people in the North are now more Democrats. So when this happens, you know, when Jimmy Carter's president, he's a Democrat, even though he's a Christian, but now you're for the other side. You're for those people, and now abortion is now the issue. Ronald Reagan gets elected instead, and they start promising this thing of repealing Roe v. Wade, overturning that, saying that. And the religious right is finally born, the moral majority. They continue to grow. Now, mind you, these are conservative white Christians, evangelicals, who are really fundamentalists. They're not really, they were calling Carl Henry and Billy Graham neo-evangelicals because they were doing something different. They were trying to engage culture and engage social issues. And the fundamentalists were not. So now you get the moral majority, the religious right. Now you think the conservative Republicans had already moved away from the black issues because politics is about opposition, right? It's like, okay, if you guys are for this, then we're opposite of that. We're going to be for that. So the Republicans had already removed themselves from the black vote. Now you get conservative Christians, many of those leaders who were angry about racial integration, using abortion as sort of their new mantra. Now they also, because they're already separatists, these are already people who were culturally combative, they removed themselves too from the black cause. So there's no hope for any of the black cause. Now they were about social justice. They were just about social justice for the issues they cared about, which was abortion and immigration and those things. So now this takes shape and this develops over the 80s. And people are just as indoctrinated by this as they say you're indoctrinated by Marxism or whatever it is, right? It's the same indoctrination, but it doesn't seem that way. It's just, this is what we do. This is how we live. This is how we think. Politics becomes fundamental, and conservative politics on these particular issues become the primary thing that people care about. So this keeps going and going and going. Fast forward to the late 1990s, early 2000s. Reform theology, the young, restless, and reform movement is growing. People have discovered reform theology, but the young, restless, and reform movement is not really, it's different from the historic reform movement. And here's what I mean. The historic reform movement was connected to creeds and catechisms and things like that. You know, confessions. The young, restless, and reform was just connected to Calvinism. It was mostly Calvinism and theology, but they were sort of, they weren't connected to creeds, and so there was more of a willingness to engage culture in a different way. But because everyone thought we're all evangelicals, no one really was thinking there's fundamentalists here and there's neo-evangelicals. There are people who want to engage culture and people who don't. We were all acting like, white, at least in the white side, we're all acting like everyone's on the same page. So now we're in the late 90s, early 2000s, and CHH develops, Christian hip hop starts to develop. And a lot of artists start learning about reform theology. And they start putting clips of guys like John Piper and Paul Washer and different people on their albums. And then you're exposing people to theology. And all of a sudden, around 2003 is when sort of theology and the East Coast Christian rap, which was the dominant art form and the dominant location because of cross movement and mainly them and a few others, all of a sudden now you got this robust theological understanding of music. And then it starts to grow and develop and develop and develop. And all of a sudden, as these urban youth are hearing their favorite rappers rapping about election and the atonement and the tulip and all this stuff, they start realizing we want to go to churches that teach this. So as the movement, as the CHH movement grows, young urban black people start coming to conservative white reformed churches. Now, mind you, we don't have the history of what I just told you. And I gave you the Cliff Notes version. There's so many things I skipped because I know this is an interview with a time frame and we got to get to where we're going. So I skipped a ton. You know what I'm saying? I'm already trying to be on my mini micro machines a little bit just so that we can have context. There's tons I should have said, but I was like, that's for another time. But that's for the Cross Examine podcast. We a slow roast over there.
Y'all definitely get it in with the time over there.
We're gonna have a longer treatment when we get back for season 3. But you get these young urban who are just excited to hear like solid doctrine and like our rap. This is the doctrine our rappers are rapping about, and white churches are excited too because wow, we're growing in diversity. Like this is what's happening. But none of us realized, oh, you have a history that you hold to, and we have a history that we hold to. There's a cross, there's some baggage that we coming with being black, and you got a history and some baggage about being white evangelicals and sort of removed from black people. I mean, in all honesty, a lot of the problem with relations between black and white people is proximity. A lot of white people just don't live around black people, urban black people, particularly in the projects and things like that. So you get these types of people are now starting to come to white reformed churches, and it was a good thing. John Piper, he accepts Christian rap, and then it just blows up in 2006. All this stuff starts to develop, right? Then you start doing these big conferences, T4G. I was there 2006, T4G 2008. The Beatty was the only black dude that was a speaker at that conference, right? I was there. Me and him hung out the whole T4G 06. His first message was basically saying there's no such thing as a race. Biblically speaking, it's the human race. And people got offended. Black people were offended. They was like, yo, hold on, fam. You making it seem like we don't, and that wasn't what the BD was trying to say. He was just saying, biblically speaking, this is more, the human race is the only race that matters. We're looking at issues of ethnicity, and we need to change how we think about race. And 7,000 white men, they loved it. There was none of that stuff, right? So this is happening at the same time as black folk. We're coming to these churches, people of color too, Hispanics too. We're hearing critiques about the black church, too emotional, not theological, and we're agreeing with all of it. The Beatty's first book was The Decline of African American Theology. He basically was critiquing the current black church. This is 06, 07, 08. He's critiquing, we're agreeing with all of the critiques against our culture. And part of it was because we think, hey, this is right. We're around sound doctrine. This is biblical. This is the gospel. This is what's happening. And it was beautiful, man. It was a good vibe. But what started to happen was really it was 2012 is when things changed. I was at T4G 2010, and I was kind of known because I was a Christian rapper. So I felt a little bit like sort of a celebrity kind of, but I would see black dudes who would just feel like not like left out. Like they would be talking to me, like black people would be talking to me like, man, I just feel a little bit uncomfortable. Like I know it's for the gospel, but I feel like just a little uncomfortable, man. How do you do it? Because I was at a predominantly white church. I would have white leaders, white evangelical big dogs would have lunch with me at these conferences and say, hey, how do we get African Americans to come to our church? Like there was this growing desire that seemed like, hey, everybody wants to make this happen. And it was starting to happen, bro. And it was beautiful. Then 2012 hits, right? Trayvon Martin gets killed. And there was some black people that felt some kind of way. That's part of the baggage that we come with. Part of the cross that we carry. Listen, somehow the cross became, that doesn't matter. That's not true at all. The cross redefines how you see it, but it doesn't say you're no longer that, right? I'm still black. I still gotta live as a man. I still gotta live as a black man. I still gotta live as all those things. My wife is a woman. She's Hispanic. She still has to live as a woman. All that stuff is real, right? So we feel some kind of way about that. And a lot of the evangelicals that we trusted, men were like, hey guys, this isn't really about the God. This isn't the gospel. This is this. And again, we weren't thinking, listen, we had already been reading Puritan books. I started reading Puritans in 2000. I knew that these men owned slaves. You know what? We set all that aside. We didn't care, even though amongst each other, we talked about it when we would get together at conferences. Man, what y'all think about that, man? That's kind of hard for me, man. But, it's the gospel, man. We ain't defined by that. I'm talking about big dogs. I ain't going to say no names because I don't want to be that dude that's like naming this dude and this dude. But it was a lot of us, we would talk about these things, but we kind of dealt with it. We knew that they owned slaves, and it wasn't a big deal, right? But in 2012, after Trayvon Martin gets killed, a lot of black folk, not many, not every, let me say this, we're not monolithic, right? Which is funny because people always say, people who disagree on it, they be like, I'm not monolithic. Black people need to stop playing the victim. Well, if we're not monolithic, then why? That's a monolithic statement, right? Mm-hmm. How can all black people be playing the victim? That's monolithic, my friend. If we're not monolithic, then by default, somebody is going to have a different experience than you, and you got to be willing to say maybe their experience is different than mine. So I'm not saying all black people felt this way, but there was a good portion of us who were in leadership and who had been trained and who were kind of had inroads into some evangelical leaders. And they were like, man, guys, this isn't, kind of like, hey, this isn't what this is about. I mean, we're one, this is Galatians, the wall of all that stuff. And it was like, man, we just hurt by this, right? So that's kind of going on. Then Propaganda releases an album in 2012, and he has a song called Precious Puritans on this song.
I remember that.
Album. When that song comes out, he pushes back. And actually, the funny thing was, the bigger picture point of the song was that don't idolize any man, including myself. He ended with saying, look, I'm a reed just like the rest of y'all. Don't idolize me either. But he pushed back against white evangelical men idolizing what he called the Puritans because some of them owned slaves. And he was speaking as a black man. Do you understand how that feels? Would you quote Columbus to the Native Americans, the Indians? Would you quote? And he was trying to make a point that can offend us. Man, white evangelical leaders were heated, bro. They were like offended and defending these men. These were men of their times. These were all this stuff. And it was like, hold on, fam. So you telling us that like these men own slaves and we don't have any evidence that they treated these slaves well, and even if they did, there was enough people saying this is sinful and wrong that these people should have only bought slaves to free all of them. We don't have evidence of that. So it became like, well, this guy's theology was great, even though, hey, we're all have character. Look at David, and it was like, hold on. So when we're bringing up issues that matter to us culturally, you're saying, hey, that's not the gospel. But when we push back on some of your theological heroes, whoa, we're crossing the lines. All of a sudden, things started to slowly change. Then in 2013, Thabiti and Douglas Wilson have this public back and forth over Douglas Wilson's book, Black and Tan. And Thabiti was trying to get Douglas Wilson to understand how insensitive some of the things he said in that book were from a black perspective. It was public. You can Google it right now, and you'll find on the old Gospel Coalition pages that Thabiti wrote on in Douglas Wilson, you'll be able to track the whole argument. Douglas Wilson finally conceded that, yeah, I could see why you would be offended. Some of this stuff was a little insensitive. His point was basically slavery was a good thing because
it was a white blessings thing.
Yeah, basically, because black people got saved. And it was like, fam, a lot of European theology came from Africans. Let's not get the Augustine origin, Athanasius, and we don't want. That's a different show. So that happens, and then once that back and forth happens, it's clear like, wow, there's some white evangelicals that think kind of crazy about some of these issues that affect us as black people, but we were still in there, still going to these conferences, still there. And then, man, 2014 hit, and then when Mike Brown got killed, it just everything erupted, man. And it became Black Lives Matter really started gaining steam, and a lot of people were agreeing with the hashtag because the movement hadn't really defined itself. At first, it was just we were just trying to say, listen, there's a traumatic imprint that we've experienced throughout history in this country that we feel like we don't matter, right? So you get all this stuff in media. Most of my life, media has only made black people vilified. I mean, we were super predators in the 80s with crack and cocaine, all that. We were just all of the gang violence. I mean, everything. You wouldn't think white people committed no crimes. Most people wouldn't even know that there was 7.7 million arrests in 2018. And 5.1 of them, million of those were white people committed the crimes, and 2 million were black people. But you would think black people just commit every crime, and we do most of the killing, everything. So a lot of the stuff has been spun. So when this happened, it was kind of like, hey, look, man, we're tired of this happening. And what this was we're tired of our lives being taken by law enforcement and nothing happening. Like for us, it was kind of like Rodney King. This is going to happen, no punishment. Yet when OJ got off, white people were heated. White people were mad that OJ got off.
I was a kid when that happened.
Hey, listen. When I
remember that.
Nobody I knew thought that OJ did it. But black people celebrated, you know why? Because it was the first time a black dude beat the system.
Right.
It just doesn't happen.
Yeah,
and he killed a white girl with blonde hair. That doesn't happen. So when 2014 happened, I think there was, and after the Trayvon, and it just seemed to be like another situation where, okay, look at the facts, all this stuff. It was like, look, man, these people their lives don't have to be taken. And it was the first time where, like, really there was a voice again to talk about some of the police brutality in these neighborhoods. But it got crazy. You know, the hands up, don't shoot that same year, Eric Garner and Philando Castile, and then all of a sudden social media, because now people have smartphones with cameras, they're videotaping these people, black people getting killed. And it was just like, and it just seemed like your timeline could be filled with 4 or 5 different videos of black people either being treated cruelly or killed. And it was like, yo, where is the voice at? And it was just still this same, not from all, but from many white evangelicals. The issue was, hey, that's not the gospel. Look, we're united by the gospel. And it's like, listen, bro, we all agree with the already not yet paradigm. So when you talk about we're unified in Christ, there's still a not yet that's a part of that. It's not like it's already, that's happened already. No, that's a work in progress. Just like we can say we're saved now, right? But the scripture says he who perseveres to the end will be saved, right? So I'm confident that I'm saved right now. I'm confident you're saved. I'm confident Los is saved. But we got to still persevere to the end, right? That's part of the reality. That's the work we do. There's still a not yet. We're saved and being saved. What's the same thing with unity and walking this life out? And what happened was it seemed like white evangelicals would hold on to the gospel, we're unified. And it almost seemed like white evangelicals would hide behind what Jesus did, even though Jesus said, nah, we're supposed to do something in light of what he did. And a lot of black people got offended, and there was a lot that was said that shouldn't have been said that way. I was glad that my brother Thabiti made a public apology about 1.5 years or 2 years ago, because a lot of people got offended. At the same time, a lot of black people were leaving some of these white Reformed churches because they felt like these people don't care, and they were going to this blackness. And that's why Eric Mason started the woke Christian. Eric Mason wasn't reading Marxism. Eric Mason started the woke movement, Christian movement, because he was talking to black people, trying to get them not to leave the church. Because they weren't just leaving white Reformed churches or they were leaving the faith.
Yeah.
So he was trying to stop people from leaving the faith and redeeming the word woke from that to try to get people to push back against that. I'm not saying that everything he said I agree with it, that he's all, nah. Sometimes he be wild with it. And
I was going to say, do you think that some of the things that he says is extreme?
I do, 100%. 100%. And I think it's 100%. I'm just like, fam, I can't bang with that. And I don't got to, because I'm not in his church. I'm not under his leadership, so I don't got to. But I think he can go way overboard. But a lot of what's happening right now is there was a disconnect from a historic non-engagement of social issues that don't pertain to anything besides this narrow conservative view, conservative white view. And abortion being the main one, which was Jerry Falwell's. It was really his hustle, for real. And then it was a disconnect between black people who still felt like, man, there's still work to be done. Because we're the ones going to these. You will not find in anywhere. I'm talking about, I've looked at all types of different people who've done studies. You will not find a migration of white evangelicals going to black churches. You will find black people going to white evangelical churches so that there's diversity. You will not find droves of white people going to predominantly black churches unless they're mega churches and people are just going so they can check a box. Some of them don't even, you won't find them going to the churches. My church is about 200 something people. You wouldn't find them going to churches like that. It was mostly black people going to white churches. And it just seemed like, man, why are we the ones who always, for the sake of the gospel, have to give up everything, and y'all just get to benefit from that and then correct us when we don't assimilate into the ways that you are. I'm not saying it was right. I'm just saying that's real. That's how a lot of people felt. And then it just kept growing and growing and growing. And then you got one side saying this is social justice and all of it. But it really is not different. It's really not different from what Carl Henry wrote about in 1947. Let me prove the point. This is the last thing I'll say, and then I'm going to let y'all ask whatever questions you want to ask. Let me just read. This is his point. This is him, 1947. This is Carl Henry. His critique of fundamentalists. Here's what he says. He says, the social reform movements dedicated to the elimination of such evils do not have the active, let alone vigorous cooperation of large segments of evangelical Christianity. In fact, fundamentalist churches increasingly have repudiated the very movements whose most energetic efforts have gone into an attack on such social ills. The studied fundamentalist avoidance of and bitter criticism of the World Council of Churches and the Federal Council of Churches and the Christ Church is a persistent example. Now, such resistance would be far more intelligible to non-evangelicals were it accompanied by an equally forceful assault on social evils in a distinctly supernaturalistic framework. But, by and large, the fundamentalist opposition to societal ills has been more vocal than actual. Some concerted efforts have been attempted through organizations, and he names them. Then he says, Southern Baptists have a somewhat better record coupled with a rejection of the Federal Council. Then he says this, in a company of more than 100 representative evangelical pastors, the writer proposed the following question. How many of you during the past 6 months have preached a sermon devoted in large part to a condemnation of social evils as aggressive warfare, racial hatred, and intolerance and liquor traffic, exploitation of labor or management, or the like? A sermon containing not merely an incidental or illustrative reference, but directly mainly against such evils and proposing the framework in which you think solution is possible. Not a single hand was raised in response. Now, this situation is not characteristic only of one particular denomination group of fundamentalists. Rather, a predominant trait in most fundamentalist preaching is the reluctance to come to grips with social evils. Now, this was 1947 during Jim Crow. This was when racism was way more staunch. And his critique is fundamentalists don't care. This is Carl, and Carl Henry would be a hero to many of them still. Many of the guys who signed the statement of social, against social justice, many of them would find Carl Henry as a solid brother hero of the faith. And his critique in 1947 is the same critique guys are saying right now. This is not a new issue. This is not a new problem that we're facing. It's the same old, same old. It's just couched in different language and different faces and names.
Let me retract. Let me go back a little bit,
Sure.
maybe a couple minutes ago to something you said. Let's just clarify. You did not say that there's no white people in black churches. You said droves of white people going to black churches.
Yeah, I didn't say there's none. My church is an example.
Okay.
My church, when people talk about white evangelicals, I'm like, man, my church ain't like that.
Yeah.
My church is diverse as they come.
Yeah, our church is this is my pastor right here. For those of you that are watching, and our church is definitely multicultural. It's very diverse. And
100. No, my point is there's not a historical trend or study that you will find that will show the diversity in these churches is because droves of white people went to predominantly black churches. It's black people went to predominantly white churches way more so than the other way around. And that's what created some of the diversity in these churches.
Yeah. We have a church near us, Bethel AME. It's all black. I don't know how. It would probably be awkward to see some white people in there, only because, and I know this is probably another topic another day, but these churches that are pretty much all black, are they accepting of having a lot of white people in there? I don't know. I don't know.
I think in this day and age, probably not. I mean, because the things that, and again, this goes to a much deeper issue of what we talked about last time I was on, what the Lord is actually doing.
Right.
This is a lot of people are reacting to, oh, it's the liberal left and it's this, and you can't, man, listen, I was in a back and forth with somebody the other day, and they were saying, yeah, but the media is always showing stories of black people, and what about this white person? Why didn't they show that this person got killed by police? And I was like, listen, bro, for the majority of my life, the stories have always been negative. And to be honest with you, even the civil rights, what we're experiencing right now, I'm not saying it's good, but I'm just saying this is the first time in the history of America that whiteness, what we call white, is being critiqued. The civil rights movement was not about white supremacy, white privilege, none of that. It was about changing laws. Like, listen, you got laws on the books that need to change.
Equality.
It was about equality. What we're seeing right now is particularly about the advantages of being white. And I'm not saying that all of it's good, but there's some truth to it. And this is unprecedented what's happening. And it's also unprecedented that the black narrative is actually being shown more in a framework that says we need to care about this. You had a little bit of that in when Emmett Till was killed, and there was this outrage, but there was so much happening in the 60s. There was international pressure. It was like, look, man, you gotta end this. And we could get into those discussions about how much of that racism really ended, because laws don't change. God's law didn't change man's hearts. Neither did man's law change man's hearts. But that's a different conversation. But I'm saying that's just the reality is that what we're talking about is not new. These are just new language, new players, and it's all the same stuff.
Right. So a lot of what we hear today is the ones that study the Bible the most are the ones who care the least whenever it comes to these social issues. That I'm not saying it's true. It's just that's just something that's said a lot of the times. We hear that. They study their Bible, but they don't live it out. They don't care about, the only thing they care about is abortion. The only thing they care about is church attendance. And now the big topic is, churches being open. They don't care that the injustice is going on. How do we stay, because you're a pastor as well, Pastor Lawson. You're a pastor in Maryland, correct?
Yeah, Maryland, yeah.
Yeah. How do we stay balanced? How do we find that balance? Because obviously there's things to speak on and to expose, but how do we find balance in the middle of all of this?
Yeah, man. Being a pastor, I think pastoring a multicultural church is probably one of the hardest things out there right now. When everything starts popping off, I think for me, what I've done is, try to meet people where they are as a pastor, try to be compassionate to where they're at. Try to find out, try to be sensitive to what feels insensitive to people. You know what I'm saying? I've had those that were angry when I said, hey, listen, the gospel is sufficient for this issue. And I don't mean what you think,
I've personally seen people get mad at you when you bring up the gospel.
And I have to break it down. I'm not one of those that are insensitive to what they're going through. But there's truth to that, but let me break it down. Let me spend some time with you to explain. And then there's others where I have to tell them, listen, you haven't understood the struggle here, or you haven't been sensitive to the issues that we're going through, as people of color or whatever. So I think for me, it's meeting people where they're at, trying to stick to what's biblical, and really, as a pastor, that's my role. I'm called to be biblical, not to go with every cultural trend that's out there. You know what I'm saying? So let's go back to what's always been the answer. But how you relay that to people where they're at is somewhat, it takes time, and I don't mean I change, every time with everybody for, I'm not a chameleon or anything like that, you know what I'm saying? But I stick to what's true. How you relate that truth to people, pastorally, that could look differently. According to where people are at. And what I don't like is people critiquing that. You know what I'm saying? Like, they think it's one way. And that's one thing, as when Curt was talking about those of us who were coming into Reformed churches, I always felt the pressure of changing my culture to fit into theirs.
Yeah,
you know what I'm
100.
saying? And I refuse to do that. You know, I refuse to apologize for the expressions, the way my culture was, you know, as far as expressing ourselves, or even the way we dressed or the way we talked. I never went as far as to change my culture to fit in. And so sometimes some of the challenges has been that, look, I have to deal with people that come from my background a certain way, and that's been criticized as compromise. You know, so
Yeah.
I look at it as seeing where people are, and just as a pastor, pastoring them where they're at, and then communicating with them central truths in the gospel, you know, what's biblical, but it might look differently. It will when you're dealing with people with where they're at. So,
Man.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I agree, bro. I think, you know, sadly, man, you kind of said this, Wayne, about people who read their Bibles the most. You know, we're Reformed, right? And if you look at the Reformed tradition, which is really rich in theological understanding, and I'm gonna pose this as sort of a question that's somewhat rhetorical, but I want you to actually think through it. Los, with all the reading that you've done, Wayne, with all the reading you've done, you think about Reformed theology. Where do you go to find a treatment, like a thorough treatment, books or a church that live this out on loving your neighbor as yourself? Like, where do you go in Reformed theology?
As far as loving my neighbor, or
Loving your
others?
neighbor, loving your enemies. Like, where do you go? Like, who do you look to as your, you know, we always have these historical heroes. Like, who's your historical hero? What sermons, what teacher,
Right.
what church movement have you seen, wow, really model this?
I would say for me, Charles Spurgeon.
Yeah.
You know, the way he went into the city, he started an orphanage. You know, he had a concern for the poor.
Yeah.
I would go to him, man. And I think I relate to him too with his struggle with depression and the way he went through that. But nonetheless, the way he was faithful to the gospel, but also compassionate to the poor and to those who were in need.
Amen.
Yeah, I would say Spurgeon's my dude.
Good. Amen. I would
Yeah.
agree. You know, guess what, though? You won't be able to find many more. But if I ask you about, like, justification by faith, election, the impassibility of God, if I ask you about the incarnation, the Holy Spirit, you will be able to name hundreds and hundreds of books on that, right?
Right.
So isn't it ironic that the thing that Jesus said fulfills the law and the prophets is almost scarce in Reformed teaching? If you go on Amazon and Google love your enemies or love your neighbors, you won't find much. You go on CBD, ChristianBookDistributors.com. You go on Crossway, you won't find hardly anything. The very thing that Jesus said fulfills the law and the prophets is scarce in our theological tradition.
And I think it's even criticized now.
I think it's very criticized.
You know what I'm saying? It seems like
this is why I believe it's God's judgment. Listen, Matthew 7:12 says this. So whatever you wish others would do for you, do also to them. For this is the law and the prophets. Now let's think about what he said for a second. Jesus said that you will fulfill the law and the prophets if you actually sit down and think about how you want to be treated, and then you treat people that way. Jesus said that's the law and the prophets. That is incredible. Jesus, we're going to stand before the Lord and be like, wow, we were fools. All we had to do was sit down and think, how do I want to be treated with respect? I want the benefit of the doubt. I want grace when I'm struggling. I want people to encourage me when I'm not doing well. I want people to gently correct me when I'm falling. That's all. Jesus said that is the law and the prophets. Galatians 6:10. Do good to everyone. He says, as we have opportunity, do good to everyone, especially those in the household of faith. Brothers, I can assure you right now that the very thing, and this is what I talked about last time, and I talked about pitting Paul versus Jesus. This is what I mean. We go to Paul for how to live, but we go to Jesus for what he did. And we act like the two are different. Most people in Reformed theology, they look to Paul for the day-to-day living. They don't think, they focus on what Jesus, who he was and what he did, and we're so the cross. Man, but he taught some things too, though. Jesus taught the parable of the Good Samaritan. That parable is mind-blowing when you consider in Luke 9, Jesus sent 2 disciples to go to Samaria to prepare because he was going to Jerusalem. When the Samaritans found out he was going to Jerusalem, they were like, nope, you can't come through here. He can't come through. Nope. So then you go to Luke 10, and Jesus uses the very people who rejected him and wouldn't allow him to go through their city to get to Jerusalem because it was a shortcut. He used them as the hero of the story. So Jesus not only makes the Good Samaritan the one you should be like, these are people who just rejected him in Luke chapter 9, 2 days earlier. So then he tells the story, and and these are enemies to the Jews. He so revolutionizes in loving his enemies that if you go to a dictionary and look up Good Samaritan right now, it'll be nothing but positive about that person. So not only did they reject him and he honored them, but he changed the way people see them for the rest of human history. And we see that as soft. We like this John Wayne sort of tough guy. And don't get me wrong, I'm from that, right? I'm from that. I was a gangster, so I'm from that. I'm good with the tough guy. I can play that. But I've been really in the last couple years, but really this year a lot, man. The Lord's been really disciplining me, not on some, like just humbling me to be like, bro, this isn't it. Watching these leaders and guys that I used to be around a lot and respect, watching them just call each other names. And I'm sitting here thinking like Jesus said, if you say rocker, you fool to your brother, you're liable to go to hell. And it's just like, wow, I'm watching people say way worse than that on Twitter. And I'm like, man, this is your brother. Like, okay, if you don't agree with Eric Mason, that's your brother. Like, why I'm watching people build platforms on critiquing other evangelical pastors, YouTube channels. And it's sad. I think this is the judgment of the Lord to say, wow, you guys you don't even know what love is. You think love is tough love. Jesus never taught that.
Right.
Sure, you got to bring correction sometime and stuff. Sure. But man, these dudes act like John Wayne is Jesus to these folks, man. And I don't get it.
Let me ask you this, because I don't know if you can see the comment section.
I can't see now.
Okay, all right. So there's people that, this is again, let's go back a minute or two.
Go back. I'm with it.
You asked us a couple minutes ago that question. You said, who do you go to? Who do you turn to? And a lot of people are saying the scriptures. Why not turn to the scriptures? Why are we going outside of the scriptures? Why are we looking?
That's what we do, though. But that's what we do, though. We do that with everything else, though. Of course we have the scriptures.
We definitely do.
But we do that with everything else, though. You don't just go to the scriptures you've read, most of those people have read books by, and I don't know these people, right? But I'm saying you've read John Piper books, John MacArthur books. You've read a lot of books that help you. And there's nothing wrong with that. Right. There's nothing wrong with going, but no one just goes to just the scriptures. Of course we have the scriptures. But here's the question, though. Here's the question then. We've always had the scriptures, right? Why are we in this place then? We've always had the scriptures. America built its foundation on the scriptures. Yeah. So why are we 411 years later in this place? How does a nation that says it's built on Judeo-Christian values find that 365 of its 411-year existence is built under racial, sinful, segregation, murder, rape, and unjust living? And people are acting like we've been preaching the gospel. No. It's time to evaluate the fruit of that gospel preaching. We've always had the scriptures, but we've always also idolized men and have made them. Wow, how are Calvinists the most arrogant people? If you're actually reformed and you know you were chosen and there's nothing about you, we should all just be grateful and humble. But that's just not who we are, man.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm not saying there aren't people that are humble. We understand. I'm not. We're talking in these terms. This is how you communicate. You can't qualify everything because then the conversation takes too long.
Right.
But my point is, sure, we have the scriptures, 100%. I agree with that. But let's not act like there's not tons of Christian books, all these ministries
on a bunch of different topics.
And you won't find love is scarce. And Jesus said, this is how the world knows that I'm real. Your love, John 17, 20-23. Father, I pray that they would be one as you and I are one, so that the world may know that you sent me into the world. Why do we think people don't have any confidence in the church right now? Why don't we?
I have coworkers that bring up all the time, where's the church in the middle of all of these things right here? You know, like a lot of, and I see somebody in the comment section just said it too. He said he's a police officer. He's a Christian police officer. And he said he's gone out where he lives and he's gone and, you know, to the homeless and helped them out. Where are the churches at? He said, I haven't seen one church in 5 years. Now that's that area where he's at. Our area where we live at there, you know, we have, we live in Lancaster, so we have a lot of Puerto Rican Christians here. And so there's a good amount of people that are hitting the streets, here, that are Christians, and they go out and help the homeless and stuff like that. But it is hard to find, because a lot of, and maybe I can be corrected in this one, but a lot of fundamental churches are more worried about preaching the gospel rather than doing good works. Mm-hmm. That seems to be the argument. That seems to be the topic at hand whenever we talk about social justice.
Always. This is how it's been.
I know I hit you up before and asked you that before. How do we deal with that part of it? Like,
I think for me, from coming into Reformed theology, and I would say Reformed churches, for me, it seems like they're guarding more their way of doing things.
100%.
You know what I'm saying?
Method.
Right. It isn't really a theological perspective. I feel like, for instance, me coming in with a different culture, a different way of doing things, it felt like people were guarding the way they were doing things in church, a way of doing things, a culture, and I think that's what I saw. Because I agree with their doctrine, but I was just questioning, 100%. I can't raise my hands up in here during worship, I can't say amen during the sermon, like what's up with that? Why can't I? Mm-hmm. And so I see more of that than I do like guarding theology or a theological perspective,
Yeah. Do we have to choose sides when it comes to where people stand on social justice on this one? Because this is, there's a line that's drawn in the sand on this social justice topic, at least in the reform circles. Do we have to choose a side? And if so, how do we choose what side we're going to be on? And I'm speaking to both of y'all. Like, That's a tough one right there. Because, without saying names, what I'm talking about when I say there's sides to this social justice.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think, so two things. One, I think we need to stop worshiping these platform epistemologians. And what I mean by that is, like, we've gotten to a point, and this isn't new for us. It's just, we just think people who have bigger platforms than us have more wisdom from God than us. And some people will respect a Voddie Baucham or a John MacArthur or Eric May or somebody more than their own pastor even. And that's what America has built itself on, sort of this Christian culture where we go to conferences to meet these guys and we read their books and they're celebrities to us and we respect them. And so however they carry themselves, we defend that. So if a dude says something crazy, we just don't care because that's our guy. And we need to, that's going to be hard for people, but it's just platform epistemologians. In the scriptures, when Jesus said, look, it's easy for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than the rich to be saved. And the disciples were like, well, then who then can be saved? And the reason why they asked that question was because in their minds, rich people are blessed by God. Those are the people that we definitely know have God's blessing. And Jesus just said they're the least people to be saved. There are people with big platforms that we follow and that we respect them because we think their platforms mean somehow they're hearing from the Lord in ways that we're not. And that's just not true. We need to kind of let that go. And this is what I think. And I think COVID has actually made it worse because now people aren't in churches with their with their local pastors, and everything's all through a screen. So, you're caught up in all this stuff, this platform epistemology. That's one thing. But two, I think, listen, when you stand before the Lord, you're going to give an account for what you did, what you said, not what John MacArthur, not what Voddie said, not what Candace Owens said, not what the Beatty said, not what Eric Mason said, not what John King said, what you believe to be true. And all of us, I think 1 Corinthians 12, right? The body, the hand cannot say to the foot. God gave each of us we're different parts of the body. And because of that, we're going to have different emphasis. We need people to be at abortion clinics preaching the gospel. Praise God. Because we want righteousness to come to bear there. We need people who care about criminal justice reform. We want people saying, hey, black people are being disproportionately locked up. We want that because we want righteousness to bear. We want orphanages. We want adoptions to be there. We want Christians there. We want Christians to care about sex trafficking because we want the gospel to come to bear there. We want Christians in politics. The problem is we're all trying to say what you can and can't do. And everybody needs to be a foot and everybody needs to be an arm. And you critiquing a foot, brother. You don't have the conviction to do that. I don't think everyone needs to make race and treatment of justice their main thing. I don't think everybody has to feel that way. But don't critique everybody that is doing that. Like, God has people there for that. You do what you do, but make sure you're doing something. Because a lot of these people that say just preach the gospel, they ain't preaching the gospel.
They ain't doing anything.
They ain't doing nothing. Your pastor's preaching the gospel. Yeah. That's what most people mean. We need to just preach the gospel. No, you need to go to churches where they're preaching the gospel. You ain't doing it. Your pastor's not reaching nobody. He's reaching you, and you're not engaged culturally. Like, you cannot, even the whole, I mean, the enemy, man, the enemy is, he's employee of the month. He's been employee of the month since March. Satan is the employee of the month. And I'm watching Christians who are going to spend eternity together calling each other the vilest names because you disagree. Like, what is a cultural Marxist biblically? What is a social justice warrior biblically? What is white privilege biblically? Like, how does a person actually repent of that? What is gaslighting and virtue signaling? And it's funny because the John MacArthur, Voddie Baucham, and all them will critique the Beatty and Eric Mason and all them for using secular Marxist theories, but then you critique them using the same secular Marxist language. It's ridiculous to me. Like, what is it biblically? What is cultural Marxist biblically? What do I repent of if I'm a cultural Marxist? Where am I not honoring the Lord? It's ridiculous because, one, we've never been really trained in being loving. We know how to love our family and we know how to love people that we spent time with, but we've never, and this is a Reformed theology thing, we've never really sewn into what does it mean to practice loving people that we don't really bang with. The scriptures say, look, even unbelievers lend to people and expect it back. Even unbelievers love the people that they know. But Jesus said, now you got to be different, and we don't know how to do that. And this is what the Lord is exposing. He's exposing a loveless Christianity in America. Not everyone, but largely a loveless Christianity where just all it took was a little bit of racial tension to show that people were willing to just basically make ministries off of critiquing believers as if Jesus is so proud. This is the most unloving I've ever seen people be. And you cannot convince me from any scripture that Jesus is pleased with what he sees happening in the church.
That's good.
We need to stop looking for people to be leading the way and start saying, what do I need to do? So here's what you do, believer. Tomorrow, spend some time and think, okay, Lord, how do I want to be treated? And how do I treat people that way? I don't care what these other people say and do. I'm going to do this because when I stand before you, that's what I care about. Okay, Lord, what opportunities do I have to do good today? And how do I do good to those who are to everyone, but especially my brothers in the faith. And you might not always have opportunities, things happen. You have family, you have those things happen, right? That's what's missing. It's not rocket science. It's just that we don't sit down and think, wow, I honestly don't know. I've never really been trained that well to be biblically loving. And I just don't know how to do it. I've never sat down and wrote down, how do I want to be treated? And then every day prayed, looked at that list and said, this is how I'm going to treat other people. It's not complicated. What's complicated is that we just don't want to do it.
That's good. I think what people need to do with Paul too is to look at his heart behind his letters.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like, people forget his heart for the churches that were, buying into another gospel or tolerating the sexually immoral. Like, he wasn't just correcting these churches, he was loving on these churches. You know what I'm saying? He had a heart for them. For Timothy, his second letter, he was about to die. He's loving on Timothy, calling him a son. People focus so much on, for instance, his warnings on false teachers and on doctrine. We have to look at the heart behind it too. You know
that's
what I'm saying?
not all he did, right?
Yeah,
People
man.
always talk about he corrected Peter. Look, he corrected Peter publicly in Galatians chapter 2:9. But what did he say in chapter 2, verse 10? They asked that we would remember the poor, which I made every effort to do.
Right.
How do you remember the poor, fam?
And that's not social justice.
That's not social justice.
That's just a heart for those who are in need. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, bro.
But what the early church did, the way the early church overtook Rome, I got a book back here by Rodney Stark. Excellent book. Where's that joke? Man, I got so many books over here. You know how it is, Los. And fun. Rodney Stark, great historical theologian. His point was this: in the early church, they believed that people were made in God's image was the most significant doctrine that they would do to distinguish themselves from everyone else. This is why when the plague hit and people were dying and fleeing the cities, Justin the Apostate told the pagan priests, in order to maintain paganism, they need to imitate the Christians who were burying people, taking people to the doctors, feeding people, some of them getting sick and dying as well, because they felt like what people would call social justice today, fam. They felt like being made in God's image is most important. And if we really think that God cares about people made in his image, then you can't just make it about just the womb. It's ironic to me, like the left seems like they only care about the ones born, and the right seems like they only care about the unborn. And it's like, listen, life isn't just what starts in the womb. I get that that's a heinous, evil thing, but any murder, like we all got kids, right? Mm-hmm. Who wants to get a knock on their door like, man, your son was shot by police or something like that? And you supposed to just be like, well, look, let me wait for the tape. Let me wait to see what happened. I'm a dad, fam.
Right.
I'm going to break down. I'm not worried about what he said and did. I lost my son. He's dead. He didn't get a trial. He didn't get to go to trial to see if he was guilty. At least I could spend time with him. Maybe help him get his life right and he could repent before he dies, even if he got life in prison. But he's gone. Like, people are losing their children. What about black on black crime? And this is what I mean. This is where we get frustrated. Like, these conversations always go back to that, right? And even these people, like, it's intellectually dishonest to bring this stuff up because, one, so here's what people will say stuff like this. Well, the people shouldn't worry about police killings because only 19 were killed in 2018 or last year, and they killed 400 in Chicago alone. Like, what about that? Like, this is what people say. Black people they're 13% of the population, but commit 52% of the murders. Here's what they don't tell you, though. Okay, there's 47 million black people, right? That's 13% of the population. There were 4,372 murders that were attributed to black people last year and 3,800 and something to white people. Okay, so black people technically had 52% of those murders, right? So there were less than 5,000 murders committed. Let's just assume those were individual black people. So there were less than 5,000 individual black people that committed a murder last year that constituted 52% of the murders, right? Out of 47 million people, that means 99.9012, it was 0.01025% of black people committed a murder last year. That means 99% of black people did not commit a murder last year. You'd have to meet 10,000 black people to meet one murderer based on the stats, right? But when they say it, hey, they commit 52% of the murders. They don't break it down in less than 1% of black people committed a murder last year. You know why? Because if you say that, that's not as exciting.
Who would you say right? Who would you say that they are? Who's saying this out there, Curt?
I think Candace Owens, Voddie Baucham, all the people that push back against people who cry out against what they would call police brutality. Any of them. I don't care who they are. I'll name names. All them people who use them stats. That's intellectually dishonest. That's intellectual. I can pull out the FBI crime stats. I got all of them. I got all the receipts. I got all of them. I can pull out the Walter Scott Notification Act that proves that there's no federal database that can actually track what the police, how many murders have actually happened. I can prove all of this. This is all fact. When they present these numbers, they act like black on black crime is so different than white on white crime. And so what people hear is that, oh, black people are prone to violence and criminality. Since when though? Like if we look at American history, let's look at 400 years of history. Who has been prone, if we're just going by that stat, who has been prone to be more violent? If we're looking at American history, just as our nation, who's proven themselves to be more prone to violence and criminality? You have to say white men. You have to look at slaves, but we don't say that. We don't talk like that. We don't talk like that because everyone's prone to violence and criminality because we're all sinful. But there are people who perpetuated things. So all these things they're all just intellectually dishonest. Look at the numbers for real. Listen, stats only matter when you're making an argument, a debate. Stats don't matter in real life. Listen, you guys have daughters. I don't, right? There's a 2.8% chance that your daughter may be molested or your wife, right? But like your wife at nighttime, if she sees a dude walking towards her, she's nervous. She's getting in her car quick, right?
Right.
There's a fair chance. I mean, I don't know your story, so I'm gonna make a statement that may or may not be true. My assumption is that my wife has never been attacked at all in terms of rape. Like someone hasn't tried to attack my wife.
No.
Okay, my wife is. I'm not gonna say her age. She might get mad, but my wife is old enough that should have happened based on how long she's been alive. Yet when she goes jogging in the daytime, my wife still says, "Hey, pray for me because I'm going jogging." I'm like, babe, it's 1:00 in the afternoon. I know, but somebody could grab me, and it could be just guys cutting grass. And you know why? Because even though the percentage, you know what I'm saying? Even though the percentage is low, it can still happen, and it bothers her. Yeah. If I come to Lancaster and I say, hey, if y'all say, hey, Curt, we got this dope restaurant we want to take you to. Listen, we go there, but I do want to tell you, 1 out of every 100 people get food poisoning. Are you cool with that? I would be like, nah, fam. Now you would say, what you mean, man? There's a 99% chance you're not going to get food poisoning, right? That doesn't matter to me because I don't want to be that 1%, right? None of us do. None of us. You're not going to take your wife to a restaurant or take your kids to a doctor, right? Say your kid needs back surgery and you go visit a doctor. He's been working 20 years and you find out, hey, this guy can do the surgery. He's been doing this for 20 years. But we do want you to know he has had 18 complaints in those 20 years. Would you still let your kid do the surgery with him? Maybe, but you would be like, "Hey, could we get another opinion?
Bringing up some good stuff.
could we get another doctor to look at that?" But the guy who killed George Floyd had 18 complaints in 20 years and is still an officer. That would be malpractice if he was a doctor, right? When we're talking about stats and stuff, it only matters when you're critiquing the struggles that black people have. You don't. These stats don't matter in real life. I'm not going to no restaurant that I think I could get food poisoning no matter what the percentage is. People are terrified of flying. There are 10,000 flights every day. Rarely do you hear of a plane crash. They say you have more chance of dying in a car than a plane, but people are terrified to fly. The fear is irrational, right? Because it doesn't matter. If it can happen to you, you care. The majority of police are good police, man. Good police. I got some buddies that are police. But when I get pulled over, I don't know which one he is, though. I don't know if this particular officer in this particular moment has had a rough day. He might have PTSD, and now he might think because I'm a big black dude, and he might just be all of those things could happen, and I could. Has that happened to me yet? Of course not. No. But those things don't matter, man. So all this stuff is all smoke screens. It's just, listen, it's easier to do that than say, man, How do I want to be treated, and how should I treat others? Jesus says that's the law and the prophets. And all our John MacArthur's vote, all these people that we can name, Candace Owens not even a believer. Don't ever put nothing. Don't ever tell me, listen to what she says. She's not even a believer. I don't care what she says. I only care when there's an unbeliever. If you're my doctor, I care what you think. I don't care what she says. Don't put her and say, here, look at her. That just means that's who you want to represent your opinion. So again, to me, all this stuff is just like, it's just both sides have just done a terrible job, and people are offended, and now it's just gone so far that the only thing that's going to change is persecution.
Let me ask y'all one more question. Are all the true Christians going to vote for Trump? You don't know where I'm coming from with that?
Go ahead.
So there was something.
I know where you're coming from.
Yo, Los tries to stay away from this stuff because it upsets him. He stays away from it because it upsets him. So there's information going around that.
Now that's public, man. You gotta say that. That's public.
You know, I'm trying to be PC. There's a certain belief going around. That John MacArthur has assured Trump that the Christians are going to vote for him.
He assured.
More than that, he said no true Christian will vote Democrat.
There we go.
So it wasn't just he thought he put it down. He put it out there. And now other people are now. That's the sentiment. You cannot if you vote Democrat, you are not a Christian. How could you support abortion
or anything other than Republican? Really?
Right.
That's it basically.
I don't like statements like that from a pastor, but. And I'm not.
This is from the Just Preach the Gospel guy,
right? I'm not giving him a pass either, but I mean, the brother in his church, they're being treated a certain way by the county. You know what I'm saying? They just took their parking lot.
Yeah, that's crazy.
You know what I'm saying? So like, I might have said a couple things that weren't on point at that time, out of anger and frustration. I don't know. I haven't heard it.
He ain't say it because of that though, fam. That
I don't know.
He had a real talk with Trump. Like
right, I don't.
Conversation.
I didn't read that. I don't know about that. But what I'm saying is, I mean, they're trying to shut the brother down. And the church. So I don't agree with that. I don't think a pastor should be telling anybody who to vote for and what to vote for. But yeah,
just a couple years ago, he was against talking politics in the pulpit.
Yeah,
there's sermon excerpts. There's real clips of him saying this stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
when somebody else was in office.
Right.
So
we could point to any pastor who said anything,
No, I know.
In certain parts, so I don't want to beat up on MacArthur.
No, for sure. But just asking.
Right.
And asking.
Yeah, I think we need to be careful in talking to, really about pastors in general. You know what I'm saying? Like, but anyway, I disagree with the statement. You know what I'm saying? But, yeah, I don't think a pastor should be swaying people politically. I think our roles are to be pastors. You know what I'm saying? Not politicians.
That's the reason why I bring it up. Go ahead,
culture,
Kurt.
That's the critique, though. In this culture, that's a critique of John MacArthur, whether you like it or not.
Right.
That's the culture we're in. Like, you can't even say, no, I don't think I agree with that. Like, now it's so polarized. Someone who's a John MacArthur fan is going to hit. That's a critique of him, whether you want to or not.
Right.
That's what we've gotten. We've gotten to a point where platform epistemologians are the gatekeepers of Christianity. And to me, while I think abortion is a vile, evil thing, I think that adding to salvation based on a vote is unbiblical. I think that goes against everything that I think the Bible teaches about what makes us saved.
Right. Here's a question. Can you be Christian and be for abortion?
Can you be a Christian and for abortion?
Yeah. Like
agree with it as a good thing?
Politically speaking, like, could you, politically say yes to abortion as a Christian?
I don't think you should, as a Christian, say yes to that. But then again, like, how do we understand those parameters? Like, what if someone says, "Oh man, this baby is going to die when it's born"? Like, I've had friends that have had that happen, and they decided to go through with the pregnancy, and we were there at the hospital and held little chase for a couple of hours, and then he died. I've had that happen twice, right? It's complicated. You can't just sweep that off a rug. What if the lady finds out, listen, I'm sorry, but there's a tumor that's grown inside of you, and there's a high probability you're going to die if you have this pregnancy. Like again, if we're just talking about as birth control, absolutely, man, of course. But
I'm talking about policy. When you're talking about a policy, abortion being a policy or something that, a politician is pushing, and I'm not saying you can't vote Democrat. I'm not getting into that. What I'm saying, right. I'm trying to figure out how a Christian with their conviction as a Christian could be for someone who's pushing, not for, abortions as far as those who get raped and get, pregnant, but just abortion as birth control. Because that's really what they're pushing, just an all out, even funding Planned Parenthood. How can a Christian do that with their conviction as a Christian?
So let me ask you this question. In the 46 years, I'm going to answer your question with a question. In the 46 years since abortion has been on the books, this is 47th year, it happened in 73, Roe v. Wade. So this is year 47. In the 47 years, the political party that has been staunchly against abortion is the Republicans, right? For 20 of those 47 years, they've had control enough of either the House. Well, I'll just say this. In 2001 to 2007, Republicans had the presidency, George Bush. They had the Supreme Court, more conservatives. They had the House and the Senate from 01 to 07. And abortion didn't get touched. Planned Parenthood didn't even get defunded. Even this year, I could give you an article this year that said in 2019, Planned Parenthood was funded really well. They had a great year last year. I can give you the article, right? So there were 20 of the 47 years that abortion has been on the books. Republicans could have clearly pushed back against it, and in some cases from 01 to 07 overturned it, or at least brought it down to the states, made the states fight against it and all this stuff. They could have done it, made it very clear. Not one time did that happen, not once. So my question is, if the Republicans, and I'm not a Republican or a Democrat, mind you, so I'm not a Democrat, so I'm not speaking from their standpoint, but I'm making a point. If the Republicans, who are promising believers that abortion is on their ticket, which is what started the religious right, then why hasn't they done anything about it? You cannot tell me that it's been tied up. You know why? Because Republicans don't care either. See, my concern is none of them are on our side. None of them have Christ crucified. None of them want to spend eternity with God. They want your votes. And what a lot of Christians are doing is saying, hey, as long as you say you're against abortion, you got my vote, even if you never do nothing about it. Right. Every election is the most important election in my day of my life. Republicans have not done anything to end abortion. Trump, people like, you know why Republicans like Trump, conservatives? Because Trump likes to trigger the left. And that's where we're at now. We like to trigger the political opponents. That's what we're doing now. And we want to trigger the political opponents. That's why we liked him. When we watched him go back and forth with Ted Cruz and calling him little Mario. What was that dude's name from Florida?
Mark Rubio.
Mark Rubio, little Marco. I mean, it was just funny, especially guys like us. We grew up going like that. And
listen, man, I kind of predicted this years ago. I wouldn't be surprised if MCs from back in the day start running, for president and actually get in office, or celebrities. You have to be a celebrity now,
Yes.
and I think that's the downfall then of the whole thing,
I agree. But my point, though, is I think Republicans have been hustling Christians for a long time and getting Christians all riled up over abortion, and they haven't done anything about it. And I guarantee, I bet these next 4 years, if Trump wins, ain't nothing going to change. Ain't nothing going to change because they're too worried about the status quo of the culture to rock the boat. And
by status change, you mean nothing's going to change, meaning abortion will still be legal.
Abortion. Christians aren't talking about, hey, we disagree with partial birth abortion or full. That's not what Christians say. We want it gone. That's what Jerry Falwell started the religious right with. Ronald Reagan, in one of his speeches, I got receipts, right? I got to get these to the IRS. I got plenty of receipts. Ronald Reagan made one of his platform pieces to end abortion. Nothing happened, fam.
Yeah.
Nothing happened. From 2001, you had George W. Bush, who was a believer, which I liked Bush. I actually liked Bush. I'm sorry. I liked him. He was
regardless
a cool
of
dude.
what Kanye said.
Regardless.
Which George Bush? This is George.
George Bush doesn't like black people. I like W.
Okay, gotcha.
Especially when he would mess the names up. Guduku, Mr. Guduku. Them joints would kill me. But I'm just saying, like, he didn't do it. And he was a believer who I actually think was a believer for real. It's just, to me, it's like these little questions go back. Cool, but I'm not the Lord, right? There's a lot of things that we've believed and have done that the Lord is like, listen, your eternity is not going to get taken away because of that. That was the wrong way to think about it. That was the wrong way to see it. But it's different to me if someone believes in abortion, but then that's different if someone's actually doing that. There might be people who think, well, I don't know. I just think it's a guess. I don't think the Lord is going to be like, well, that's the issue that determines your eternity. I don't think so. I just don't think so. I don't think Christians should approve policy of it. But at the same time, abortion is the law of the land anyway. It's already the law of the land. So if you vote Democrat, okay, maybe they're trying to push more of it, and I get that, right? But it's the law of the land. What Republicans need to do is be held accountable for the promises they made. You even said this on the show. John MacArthur he used to talk about, I remember him critiquing Bill Clinton's character. I heard the sermon. I wasn't even a Christian. I heard the sermon critique his character. But now it's like, hey, we're not voting for a pastor. We're voting for, it's just all of this stuff. And I'm only saying him because he's putting himself out there.
He does love to speak on these things. He does love the attention. Right. We can't run past that.
And that's why I think we should just back off and just do what we're supposed to do as pastors. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now I'm not saying pastors can't speak on these things. The pastor can speak on whatever they want. I'm saying for me, I'm not going to use my pulpit to sway people.
I appreciate that about y'all too. I've actually, I look up to that. I've talked with you, Curt, and the fact that your stance on politics and I appreciate it because I've always felt overwhelmed and felt like I needed to pick a side and I needed to do this, and I just always felt like I had to choose. And it's like,
listen, I told people in my church this in July. I said, listen, if you're going to be offended at your brother or sister for voting opposite of you, then biblically you're not mature enough to vote. You're not even mature enough to vote. How is it that voting has become like something you must do as a believer? Book, chapter, verse.
Right.
It's not. If that's causing division, if I can't vote in faith, I'm not voting.
That's what I did.
I'm not voting for the president this year. I've said it in my church. I'm not ashamed of it. You can come at me. I'm not voting.
So you're not left.
I'm not left or right. I'm not voting, period.
I'm only asking that because maybe somebody would listen to what we talked about tonight and think, yo, they keep on bashing the right. I didn't hear too, what I mean?
Now, the left is wild. I mean, listen, man, let's just be honest, right?
I look at it like a non-factor. There's no way none of us are going to be left because it's just so unbiblical.
Right.
I just can't. Listen, the left, this is the thing I would say about the left, and whoever I offend, I'm not trying to, but this is just what they putting out there. These clips of Joe Biden being incapable of some at times coherent thoughts. If he really is having early dementia or some inability to cognitively answer questions consistently, not that he can't at times.
Right.
If that's true, then you hate America more than anyone else. Because if you're going to put someone in the presidency who is not cognitively fit to be there, then that's dangerous. That is dangerous. This is one of the most significant moments, and we're one of the most significant countries in the history of the world. If you're going to put a dude up who really can't hang cognitively, and you're trying to avoid debate so you don't expose this, that's ridiculous to me. You are not someone who's a patriot. You hate our country. I'd much rather have 4 more years of Trump and his wild tweets than a dude who can't even answer, who's like, come on, man. You know what I mean? Hey, man. Like, listen, bro, I don't need you to talk hippie slang to me Answer the question. Like, I'm not worried about that. Come on, man. Nothing. Like, this ain't Woodstock, fam. Like, this is, so to me, it's so, this is how wild it is. They hate Trump so much that they would be willing to put somebody up who may not. And for all they talk about diversity, you got the oldest white man possible to be the presidential nominee. And the woman that is his vice president crushed him in the primaries. She sat that man down. That's why he almost lost. If they hadn't rallied behind him in South Carolina, talk to that black pastor and ask him to use his, they get everybody, oh, look, if you don't do this, Trump's going to win. Man, Joe Biden was done. Bernie Sanders was smoking. Kamala Harris was one of the first popular people to be out of the race because they were like, even her team, the people who were running her campaign, said she doesn't have character. Yeah, that's what they said. Yeah. That's what they said. I was surprised she was I thought she was going to last longer. She was one of the first out. Then Cory Booker, and I was like, she was out before Amy Klobuchar. I was like, what? Amy Klobuchar hung longer than she did. Man, the Democrats we're doomed. We're doomed whoever wins on one level. We're doomed. But I think this is what the Lord has for us, though. I think the Lord is allowing this to happen, not because we want politics to legislate a lack of suffering for us. Listen, the American church is the least persecuted church in redemptive history. And a lot of our politics are trying to legislate a lack of suffering. There are Christians in China, India, Malaysia, Iraq, Syria that don't have any other things that we have, and they love Jesus. And if the Lord takes away some of my liberties that I'm used to, while I'm not going to like it, it's going to be uncomfortable, I'm praising him anyway. Right. If I'm Daniel, if I'm Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael, I'm using their Jewish names. If I'm those dudes, I'm going to stand and say I'm still going to praise him regardless. Take these rights, man. This isn't it. And Christians, man, there's so many levels to this, bro. And I just think it's sad to me, man. And it breaks my heart. And I was a proponent of being argumentative and ready to go around. And I was just like, look, brother, like, I'm not trying to fight with you, fam. Like, I'm trying to honor the Lord. And yeah, we get passionate about things and all of that. But at the end of the day, I'm trying to fulfill the law and the prophets, so to speak. Obviously, Jesus did that, right? So we don't. But what I'm saying is, he still told us, look, whatever you wish others would do to you, do also to them. I think if more Christians did that, if we stopped having conferences about like old theologians about the same old stuff, and we just said, hey, let's spend the next 2 to 3 years calling out to the Lord, right? That's biblical, right? They're calling out to the Lord and learning how to love our neighbor and our enemies. And all these guys with these platforms spend their time doing that. Totally different ballgame. Totally different ballgame. Good. But now you got to appease you got to trigger folks. Call Eric Mason this name. Go ahead, call John MacArthur this name. Go ahead, call out Voddie and say that he's this. Call out this. Say this. Call out Lecrae. Call out this. Do this. Call out everybody. This is all we do and we just love it. And we love it. And the whole time the enemy is just eating chips. Like, look at these dudes. Eating chips, loving it. Yeah. Loving it, watching it. And the Lord is just like, I'm going to let it go.
Evangelical blood sport.
It is. That's what it is. I'm going to let it go. The Lord's letting it go. The two questions everyone needs to ask is, what is the Lord doing and why is he allowing this to happen? What is he trying to really show us? Is it really the liberal left? Is really the liberal media that's doing this? Or is the Lord sovereignly allowing these narratives to come to light for a reason? Why is that? Maybe because black people have been mocked the most of the time in the country, that he's actually allowing the measure you use to be measured against you. So now you're the one being judged. Now you're the one being called out. Maybe the Lord's doing that for a season.
There we go. I think we're finding some balance here. Well, oh my goodness. Well, this is not a cross-examine episode, so we are not going to go forward with this one. I love what y'all do, by the way, at cross-examine for real. Like, me and my wife watch it. We listen to it. We tune in, and you got our guy Ab over there. That's one of our close peoples right there. or Strat, or however you want to call that.
Right.
He was in the comment section defending you this whole time, yo. I didn't have time to do it, but he was in the comment section like, yo, you heard what he said, and people were disagreeing with you. He's like, nah, listen to what he's saying. So shout out to
And
Strat.
listen, I don't mind if people disagree, man. I just think, though, I ask you this. Disagree with some biblical proof and disagree with some historical proof. Like, I just gave a quick narrative, but I have receipts for every single thing that I said. I can back up by what was written, what's already been said. I can do that. Like, this isn't just some impassioned dude with an opinion. Like, this is what I honestly have read, studied, think, pray about, and I'm trying to bring balance to both sides. I don't mind if people disagree. That's totally fine.
Yeah.
But like a lot of the disagreements, like come at me with some scriptures, prove me wrong biblically, show me wrong historically. Like, what are we talking about here?
Right.
Because I'll back mine up. Like I'm not looking to. And really, honestly, with this type of stuff, man, you just know people are going to disagree. So I'm not trying to sound rude, but I really don't care. Like I'm glad people listen, and whatever was helpful, cool. Whatever they disagree with, cool. I just think you're going to stand before the Lord and give an account. And you're not going to be judged by what you agree with what I said. You're going to be judged with what you agree with what he said, what you read. And I think that has to guide you. Not your favorite platform epistemologian, not your favorite podcaster. That has to guide you. And it doesn't matter what I say, whether you agree or disagree. What's your conviction? And make sure that it honors the Lord. Have biblical basis for it, not just what some other dude said.
Right.
You interpret the scriptures. Be a Berean. And if you have any more issues, come holler at us at Cross Examine. We take all that.
Y'all take all the smoke.
We want all that smoke.
Well, we appreciate you jumping on with us tonight, Kurt. You guys check out Cross Examine and check out the basement.
Season 3 starts next week.
Right.
Nice,
yeah, you're on a
nice.
sabbatical right now, so
Yeah, we got season 3 is back up next. We back next Friday.
yeah.
Our first episode is Can You Be a Christian and Be a Democrat?
There we go. There we go. All right. Well, Lowe's, did you want to give the plugs and then we're going to head out?
Yeah, for sure. Go to wrathandgrace.com. Make sure you go to the website again. Support the ministry. And again, we have books. We have also the links to the podcast that our brother does and ours and others on the website. So make sure you go to the Radio Network link on the website and also to the music link where we also have a new album that came out. So go check that out. Share and like the video. Let people know about what's going on here. This coming or next week, we're actually going to... What are we going to do next week?
Usually we would go live on that Monday because we rotate the Mondays and the Wednesdays. But since it's Labor Day coming up, we're going to air the Hypostatic Union episode next Wednesday. It's a pre-recorded episode, but we're going to air it live. So we're probably going to jump in the comment section while you guys are listening to it.
Right, definitely. So make sure you go also to the group page, facebook.com/group/the basement, and support the page. And jump on and just be a part of what the community is doing there, man. You ask questions before the episode to get ready, and we also quote from some of the comments that people give on those questions you give. So make sure you go to the group page and support. But that is all, and that's it. Thank you, Kurt.
Catch me on Twitter.
Yeah.
Catch me well.
Yeah, for sure.
Twitter. I'm Curt Kennedy on Twitter. We're trying to offending people one tweet at a time. No, I'm just playing. trying to bring balance one tweet at a time. We can get into something.
Hey, hashtag stay balanced, right?
Yeah.
It is. Now we do. When I say I'm just joking. I mean, when I say offending people, it's not because I'm trying to, but I think sometimes when you try to present balance, people get offended on both sides.
Yeah.
I don't fit neatly into any camp.
Yeah. No, I brought up the hashtag stay because that's your phrase. That's where I got the title from.
Yeah, hashtag stay balanced.
Yeah, well, all right, y'all. We gonna get out of here. We broke the record for the longest episode, so shout out to y'all that stayed tuned this whole time. Like, we appreciate y'all as always. So we gonna get out of here. This was episode 63 of The Basement, where theology meets the thoughts of life. Today's episode title was called Finding Balance, and we're out of here. God bless.
All right, grace and peace.
Peace.